North Dakota reopened most businesses back on May the 1st, a couple of weeks ago. Since then, there have been 15 new virus-related deaths and more than 460 new cases. North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer joins us now. Sir, you will be accused of taking great risk and creating more cases and deaths by reopening early. What's your response?
Well, my response, similar to what Steve Forbes said, I might say, well, we've had the interstate open for many years and decades, and we live with risk every single day. The reality is North Dakota's always been open. Our governor didn't close most of the state. I think 80% of the businesses in North Dakota remained open throughout this entire crisis. So the other thing I think you always have to keep in mind is we're talking about a very narrow range of numbers. If you shoot 60% of your three-pointers go in and you drop to 59, you're still more productive than the teammate who went from 5% to 10% success. So North Dakota's had a grand total of 122 people hospitalized throughout this entire crisis. So I think it's a little difficult to measure North Dakota in the context of the nation as a whole, or say compared to a place like New York.
I believe that you and Governor Doug Burgum, you're going to the White House today to discuss this reopening. Is that the case you're going to present to the president and the administration? You opened and the risk was worth taking. Will you make that argument?
Well, I don't know what argument the governor is going to make, Stu, but I think that the point I think that the governor would probably make, and I've talked to him many times about this, is to express appreciation to the president for not using a heavy hand and not using mandates, but rather sharing guidelines and sharing information, and then letting the state's governors put those guidelines in the context of their situation. In Bismarck, for example, a little over a week ago, they tested 620 people. Only 6 of them tested positive. Well, that's far different than what happens in Minneapolis or what happens in Manhattan. And the president has allowed that federalism to work, and I think it's worked very, very well for our state because we have good leadership and we have common sense people, Stu. That helps too.
Well, it sure does. I understand that North Dakota schools will reopen in the summer programs for youngsters. That really contrasts very sharply with California, where California colleges are going to do online learning only, I think, for the rest of this calendar year. What a contrast. I mean, there's a contrast anyway between North Dakota and California, that's for sure.
Yes.
But when it comes to, look, I think kids need to go back to school. I'm sure you're with me on this.
I absolutely am with you, Stu. I think what we ought to be doing, since we weren't before, we ought to certainly be doing it going forward. Do everything we can to protect the vulnerable citizens in our country and let the less vulnerable citizens run the country, if you will. And by that, I don't mean govern it. I mean run it, run the economy, go to work, go to school. And if we protect the most vulnerable, it's pretty clear that there's a vulnerable population to this disease, and it's pretty clear that there's a large, vast majority of the population that isn't vulnerable to it. And
how do you protect the vulnerable, though? I mean, are you talking about elderly
Sure.
people who've got an underlying condition? Well, how do you isolate that group
Sure.
and protect them?
Well, first of all, I think with information, and most people are going to look out for their parents, their grandparents, whatnot, people that are in institutions. I mean, you look at what happened in New York, the policies there were completely backwards. If you tested positive for COVID-19, you had to take that person into your nursing home, for example. And so consequently, you have a lot of people in nursing homes that are getting this disease, and they're the most vulnerable population. So I just think we have to, again, apply common sense to the science. And we can do both, grow our economy, get back to work, as well as protect people, and then be nimble, be able to and be prepared to respond quickly. The whole issue with regard to testing, of course, is critical to all of this, because it does provide not just testing and good information, but it also allows for confidence, and that's what we're lacking right now. We have more than adequately scared people through this. I think it's time now to present some confidence, to prevent people from being scared into paralysis.
Senator Kevin Cramer, North Dakota, thanks for joining us, sir. Always appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Stu.